very much for having me. Yes, so my name's Kate Baker, and I am currently from living in Brisbane, Australia, but originally from England. I've been living here in Australia, I think it'll be 8 years, next month. So a fair while now, pretty settled, so that's good. And I got into paddling when I moved to Australia. Not straight away, about a year or two afterwards. And my boyfriend paddled, and I thought, oh, this is really interesting. I want to give it a go. I love the water. I love surfing. And so we went out paddling, and it all kind of grew from there. So, yeah, that's me.
So first question is, it wasn't kind of a planned entry into the sport, was it? It was just a random kind of thing.
Definitely, yes. Yeah.
Okay.
We both, my boyfriend and I, love the water, and we took like lots of different watercraft down to a big creek on the coast here, and beautiful clear water, bright blue, perfect for swimming, and just trying lots of different watercraft in, and just started paddling in there, and
brilliant.
Definitely not planned.
Okay, I'll throw it over to everybody online, and I'll be quiet for a while. Anybody got a question?
Sure, I have questions.
Oh, lots. Okay.
Yeah, I think we all have.
Okay, let's start. We'll work our way across the screen from the right-hand side. David, you want to start off?
Yeah, it was interesting, Kate, that I was reading, in the last few years where you've had this team of, I think Felicity Moore, the physio, you had a dietitian, is it Sally Bauman, exercise physiologist Aaron. How long, once you got involved in paddle boarding, did you realize you needed to literally hit it from every single angle, not only flexibility and recovery and strength and balance and posture, but nutrition and everything else? When did it all of a sudden say, was it fairly early on, or was it, okay, I'm a few years in, let's examine what I can do to better evolve as a paddle boarder?
A bit like my entry into paddle boarding, it was all a bit accidental and came to me, I would say, rather than me seeking that's what I needed. So I had a shoulder injury from paddling, and I went to go and see a physio, and it was at Inspire, which is where all these fantastic people I work with work at. And so I started working with the physio, and they said, oh, the reason your shoulder is sore is because of this reason and that reason. It was basically because other supporting muscles weren't working properly. So it was impacting the front of my shoulder. So then it was a very natural journey. So, okay, well, downstairs is our gym. So let's get you in the gym, and let's start working with the exercise scientists to make sure that we're using the right muscles and we're strengthening the right muscles so everything's working as efficiently and effectively as possible. And I think we just did it like that for maybe 6 months to a year of just general being in the gym and trying to strengthen things and work different muscles. And then after that, they asked me, would I be interested in working with their full suite of different services that they offer, and that's when I started working with the nutritionist and integrating like that. However, I would say that I didn't start fully working with James, who's my exercise scientist at Inspire, to do my full spectrum of training until 2018. Yes, and that was a really big switch for me, made a big difference.
And yeah, it looks like you had 2018 was a quite a good year, was that for you?
Yeah, 2018 I kind of threw all my money and all my time at it and went around Europe and did lots of yeah, lots of different races around Europe, as well as races here. And I think I went over to Western Australia and did some races in Perth as well.
And quick question was, what would you think going to, once you move to that suite of including your exercise scientist and nutritionist and physiotherapist and so forth, what's the biggest difference that you notice other than balancing everything and making sure you didn't have one area of the body more strength, stronger, but this one was weaker? Besides that,
Yeah.
what are the biggest differences did you notice?
Two biggest differences, I think. One was having all of my training looked at from like an overarching holistic viewpoint. So I was a person that, would go for a run because I love to run. So I'd do a run in the morning, and then the next day I'd do a paddle on the river, and it would be my set intervals. But nobody was thinking, okay, so you're doing a hard session that day, you should do maybe a lighter session this day, and then you can do a hard intervals that day. And it wasn't working towards the same goal and the same end point, all of my training. It was just kind of keeping fit, and generally keeping fit will help my paddling. But as soon as I started somebody having a look at a holistic overarching viewpoint and planning all of my different training into a week so it all works together and gels, that was the biggest difference by a long shot. Yes.
And yeah. Before I turn it over, I wanted to compare that to running, where I'm a runner, and I was in the 80s, I was quite competitive in the 10,000 and 5,000. You peak in an athletic season, you typically, if you're aiming to peak at a certain, everything's aiming towards, okay, 9 or 10 weeks from now or 12 weeks from now, I'm peaking for the conference meet or the state meet or the nationals or so forth, depending on obviously uni or beyond. Is that the same sort of thing you started thinking about, peaking for certain races, or was it more of a general progression? I want to get to this stage physically, mentally, nutritionally.
When I've got a full race calendar, definitely it's choose 2 key races in the year that we'll work towards to peak for. But with paddling, it's quite tricky. Like when I went to Europe, for example, you've got races 4 weekends in a row. So you're like, well, which one do I choose to peak for, and how is this going to work? So you generally just, that's where I leave it to James, my trainer, and he makes a call about when working out all the timing and when I should be peaking and what different things should be going on in the weeks leading up to that. But when I haven't necessarily got a race planned, or it's the end of season, and generally in paddling, it's about the end of season from December through to February. There's not any competitions then. We work on building base, or we look at what's the weakest link in my paddling, and then we'll work to that. So is it sprints? Is it like we want a higher average speed? Is it technique stuff? And then that's what we'll focus on, and we'll work towards that when we don't have something to peak to.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, good questions, David. Thanks. Alicia, on to you. What have you got for us?
Well, Kate, in your interview, you mentioned you did ballet for like about 4 years and judo for 10 years. What skills do you think that you learn in both sports that help you with the paddle boarding?
Oh, very, very good question. Ballet, there was probably something, but I was too young. When you're 3, I don't know that it really sunk in or I was aware of it necessarily. In terms of judo, definitely a lot of discipline to turn up even when you didn't feel like it, discipline to train, mental toughness, resilience. If you don't win, you still got to get back up and fight the next match, or you get thrown and it hurts a bit. You can't just go off and cry. Like, you need to pick yourself up and go, all right, well, that hurt, but nothing's broken and I'm not bleeding, so I'll be okay. So I think definitely a lot of resilience, a lot of discipline would be my main things.
And if we can ask, why didn't you pursue judo, like in a professional, like going to Olympics and the professional competitions that like it will give you more recognition in terms of comparing to paddling? And what was the highest color that you achieved?
I think I got my blue belt. I was going to go for my brown, but I think that's about when I stopped. So I was the top level blue belt. And why didn't I pursue it? I was about 17 and I'd been in a big competition and been thrown and torn all the ligaments in my knee. And I had to have about 6 or 8 weeks off, and I had to go to the I've forgotten, I think the osteo every day and have like electrodes put around my knee to try and bring the swelling down because it wasn't coming down. And I didn't have any amazing teams to work with back then, so I probably did a fair amount of damage and didn't know what I'd done. Like a doctor doesn't tell you, and it was just like, oh, you'll be fine. You're a young teenager, just rest it, which is very hard for an active teenager who just wants to be on the go. But that time out, I think, made me think it was a time in my life where I needed to decide, am I going to university? What am I going to study? What am I going to do with my future? And I had two very clear different pathways. I could either go to Bath University in England, because that's where I was living at the time, and study and do my judo and pursue my judo to that Olympic level, or I could go to a different university and do something else. And I just thought it was a very tough decision. I remember talking with my mum a lot about it, and we just thought, well, she always lets me make my own decisions, but I thought, if I could get injured like this, if I pursue the judo and go to the Olympic route and then get to 30 or 25 and destroy my knee or my elbow or my shoulder or anything, what is my career pathway from there? Like, what is my future prospects if I do that and something goes wrong? And is it then you just don't go down the coaching route and that's it? And I kind of thought, well, I really want to open up different prospects for myself and different opportunities. So I decided to go to a different university, study environmental science, and I'm an environmental scientist now. And
Congrats.
Awesome.
yeah, so then there wasn't any judo clubs where I chose to go to uni. I remember looking online and being like, no, there must be a club somewhere so I can still do it. But there wasn't. But it gave me the opportunity to join so many different sports and have so many other experiences. So I'm very glad that I chose that route, definitely.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good questions. Yeah. Louisa, do you have a, sorry, I forgot to tell you, Kate, we've got David in North Carolina in the United States. Alicia is as well. Luisa's in Cancun, Mexico. And nice. I'm just up the road from you, as you know.
Yeah.
So Cancun, Mexico, what have you got for us today?
Okay, Kate, I have a question for you. I don't know, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. Great. I have a question. I know that you told Mark that you didn't feel very different the sports between men and women in judo, right? Mm-hmm. Do you feel the same in paddleboarding, or you feel not only in that? Do you feel a difference between men and women, the way they're treated?
In paddleboarding, there used to be a very big difference between men and women, very big. And a lot of people have done a lot to work to bridge that gap. But last time we were racing in America, it was still females race on 12-foot 6-inch length boards, and men race on 14-foot length boards. So the longer the board, the more glide, the more efficient, technically easier for a long distance race. And so the men and the women do the same course, but the women are on a smaller board, so it's harder, and then the women get less prize money.
Oh, shocking.
That's big.
Yes.
That's
And
Wow.
there's
That's not
been
good.
so much to try and change that over the years. And progressively, a lot of countries have, but it is still America. Sorry, David, that that has still kept that difference. And the traditional thinking was that women couldn't handle a 14-foot board. It was too much board to push around. But with all the advances in technology and women getting stronger and going to gyms and physically able to handle these boards now, so it's a bit of a different concept.
wow. Thank you. That's big. That's really big.
Yeah.
How,
Yes.
and I'm sure that
They've got to change that. Yeah.
yeah.
I think they've got to change. They've definitely got to change that. And who changed that? Who made that change? You said it's changed in the recently. Who made that change?
Well, because paddleboarding is it's not run by anybody. Like, there's lots of different event organizers. It's kind of up to the paddlers to lobby whoever is organizing the race to say, hey, look, please, can you do this? Please, can we have the same length board? Please, can we have this? And I think if enough people say it over the years, they kind of go, oh, okay, all right, we'll do that. And then as soon as they switch, they never look back. It's like, oh, why didn't we do that sooner? So,
Awesome.
yeah.
It's naivety by the sound of it.
Yeah, that, and I think they're worried that they will destroy the market for 12-foot 6-length boards, so there won't be any value in those boards anymore. So it's kind of like the economics coming before the sport and progression. So
is there a union? Is there a union like a female paddleboarder? Like a union,
no,
so you could like
no.
like the WTA has, and
Yeah, unfortunately, paddling is too small, but there's a very good bond between all the female paddleboarders that we all get together and say, this, we want this. So then we all go to the organizer and say, can we do this? Can we do that? Because another big thing is they often run the female and the male races at the same time. And that just causes absolute havoc going around all the turning cans, because either the boys will get a head start or the girls will get a head start. And then the boys end up catching us up, and it just becomes havoc. And then this like almost unsaid rule that you kind of got to give way to the leading men on the boy turns. And you're like, well, that's not unfair. That's not fair. Why don't we get our own race? And there's a lot of, well, there's not as many females and it's not as interesting to watch when there's not as many, which I understand from an organisation perspective. They want to draw spectators and to make it more fun, and the more people they have on the course, the better. But it's a tricky balance between having that but also letting athletes have their space to do their sport as well.
Wow.
I have a question for everybody on the call today, not just Kate. I want to know how many people have actually tried stand-up paddleboarding.
I have not tried it yet.
Oh.
Haven't tried it yet either.
No,
Let's go for it. Let's go for it. Let's go for it. Let's go for it.
Oh.
Let's go for it. Let's go for it.
We need to have a virtual paddleboarding session.
That would be great.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yes.
We have a lake that's close by, Jordan Lake, and a lot of the people that do paddleboarding. So there's a great space. Maybe 30 minutes from here would be fantastic.
Yeah.
Kate,
Yeah.
what training preparation do you think that someone that has never tried it needs to have, and what tips would you provide to us?
No training preparation. As long as you can stand on a board and hold a paddle, well, you don't even need to stand. You could kneel if you wanted to. So you got absolutely zero excuses. There is no training preparation required. What tips? Just relax. People like grip with their toes and their legs shake, and just relax. Just stand on the board. If you get a nice wide stable board to try on, go on a day where you don't mind falling in, so maybe it's a bit sunny. Make sure that it's not windy and there's not big tides in the water that you're going, and just go and enjoy it.
I bet it's also a good meditation type of relaxation that provides when you're doing that, because it requires a lot of concentration, right?
Yeah, so your brain switches off to other things, and you're by the water, which they say blue space is a lot more relaxing of an environment, being by the water. Yes.
Thank you.
I
Yeah.
have a question. I'm when you started, I know that you didn't plan to do it, right? It was, yeah, because of your boyfriend. And but you imagine making this and winning a race and being really, really good, not because you're not in judo or any other sports, because you definitely are. But could you imagine something like this, or it took you by surprise, or where can you see it in a couple of years?
Yeah, when I look back on like how it all started and where I got to, it's a bit like, oh wow, yeah, if I had planned that, I never would have planned it like that at all. No way I would have dreamed that big or anything. In a couple of years, where do I plan? I don't know. It depends what happens with the race seasons. COVID's just stopped everything here, and Australia has very strict international border policies. So our international borders have been closed since the start of the virus, and looks like they're not reopening till possibly the end of next year.
Wow.
So I'm not sure what's going to happen, but to be honest, for me, as long as I'm still getting out on the water and enjoying being on the water every day, and that's what matters, and doing it with friends, and yeah, that's yeah, the only thing really that matters to me.
Okay, that's great. That's great.
I
Yeah,
just
because you enjoy it.
Yes, that's it. I enjoy it. I love being out on the water in the fresh air. You can do it with friends, and it's become our social life as well. So we see lots of people and who do it on the water at the weekends and spend time with them, and yeah, so it's good.
And you don't have any restrictions over there in terms of like when you meet for paddle boarding?
No, we're very lucky that there are very few, if any, cases here in Queensland now, or in Australia as a whole. So we are free to go and paddle and move around the state as we like. Yes.
That's awesome. What is your best spot for paddle boarding if you have to choose a place in Australia?
A place called Currumbin Creek. So
And how far is that? And how far is that from you?
It's about an hour and 10 minutes.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yes. Yeah.
And
so,
a place outside Australia that it will be like a dream place for you to do it?
Oh, that's a good question.
Cancun, Mexico.
Yeah. Yes. Do you know what? Probably not because of the water or anything, but somewhere in England, just so my family and friends can see me do it.
Okay.
My dad and my stepmom did come to Spain when I raced in Spain a year and a half ago. So that was really nice for them to see me race then, but none of my other family have seen me even paddle, let alone race. So to do something in England would be really fun. Yeah.
Wow.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Actually, talking about England, I'm wondering in the UK, since you've moved over to Australia, are there have you seen the sport grow in the UK?
Massively.
And where would you say the strongest paddle boarders are they pretty evenly dispersed, or you have pockets where they're really good paddle boarders?
To be honest, I don't know because I haven't paddled in England, so it's just from hearsay. So I only know the groups that I kind of know of. There might be a lot more out there, but I know the South Coast definitely has a lot. But even like the East Coast has a group. So I would say there's a couple of groups dotted all over England. Yes. They do some great races. They do like the Great Glen Ultra, where they go in Scotland from one side of a lock to another, and there are some really good races over there. So yeah, it's great to see that the culture is alive and thriving, maybe when there's not a virus. Yeah.
Kate, I just wanted to go back to something you said earlier when you were talking about, the organisation of the sport and the chaotic sometimes approach to the way that it's being managed. One of the things that we're aiming to do at the Global Sports Channel is to have people who are responsible for events and the management of sports on our show to ask them these questions and put pressure on them to make sure that, one, we have a strong passion about equality in sport and making sure that women have the same fundamental rights and access to prize money and venues and races that men do. So that's something we're really passionate about here, that we're going to be following through on. So if you've got anybody in the organisation side of stand-up paddleboarding that you're aware of, we're not going on a witch hunt. That's not what this is about, but it's to ask those questions and bring them to the public domain so that people can understand more that, hey, if I want to get into the sport, here are some of the challenges at the moment. And let's face it, when you're choosing sport at a young age, you're going to look at the easiest ways to get in and feel comfortable and be appreciated and to earn money and all those things. So if a sport is looking particularly difficult, as you did with judo, you looked at it from an injury point of view and go, okay, there's a high risk here that I might get seriously injured and not to be able to participate in any other sport, right? So, so there's some of the things that we're aiming to do at the Global Sports Channel as well.
Great. Thank you very much.
I also wanted just to allude back to when you were talking about giving us some tips, because I've never been stand-up paddleboarding either. And
come on, guys.
Who are you talking to today?
But now we're going to try it.
That's why we wanted to find out everything, because we want to start. But I was just thinking about what you said about, gripping your feet and, being really, really stiff, I guess, on the board, right, in terms of fear factor. But you only get eaten by a shark if you fall off, right?
That's it. Yeah.
Okay. So talking of that, have you ever been in waters where you've looked down and you've seen something a little bit scary?
I had one incident once when I was paddling about 1 kilometre offshore out in the ocean, and I was just paddling along, having a nice time, and I looked down and there is something grey quite deep under the water following me swimming. I got so scared, and I immediately just turned in towards the beach and paddled as fast as I could towards the beach. And then, I don't know, it felt like forever, but I'm sure it was about a minute longer after. It popped up and it was just a dolphin.
Oh,
look at the lovely dolphin. And it was so funny how quickly your attitude changes to, I am so scared right now, to, there's a dolphin and it's so beautiful. And I'm so lucky to be paddling out here alongside this wildlife. But I have paddled, there's been a shark in the water before, and it was just a case of paddling next to someone I saw the shark near, and just paddling together, and then it went away. And in the Brisbane River, I had a bit of a bump once from a shark, so I stopped paddling in the river for a while, maybe about 3 years. I went and found somewhere else, but I'm just I don't go when it gets dusky or after really high rainfall, or I'm a little bit more careful in breeding season for the sharks when there might be protective mums around watching out for their babies.
Yeah, actually, you're not a foreigner anymore, but look, I lived in Brisbane for 4 years, many, many years ago, and the Brisbane River is full of bull sharks, yeah? And there's been a lot of cases over the year where dogs have gone missing, and cattle actually down on the lower slopes of the river where they wander in to get some water and stuff, they end up getting attacked as well. So I strongly recommend you to stay out of the Brisbane River on your paddleboard, because it's a very dangerous
I don't
place.
know. I've spent many years paddling in there, and I've only had one incident.
Really?
So,
okay. You only want one to go wrong, though, right? You only need one bad experience.
Only one wrong to go wrong. Yeah. And look, that was quite a bad one, because I was paddling along, and I felt this nudge on the side of my board, and I was like, "That's really weird. What's that?" And then I kept paddling, And then it happened again. I was like, okay, I'm like slightly more concerned now. So I crossed to the other side of the river because it's got to be about 1/2 kilometre wide. So I thought, well, they're territorial, so I'll cross to the other side if it is anything, and I'll paddle back that side. And then I paddled to the other side and I was paddling back, and then all these tiny fish just jumped on my board, like hundreds of these tiny fish. And so my feet were surrounded by all these tiny fish, and I was like, right, this isn't great. So I like get the tiny fish out and like paddle as fast as I can home, and then right by the bump ramp is where boat ramp where I get off was a big nudge on the back of my board. And that's where I was like, yeah, I'm probably not going to paddle here for a while. But like I said, I paddled somewhere else for about 3 years. But I'm back on the river now, and touch wood, it's all been fine. So.
I have a question around nutrition. So when you started to get dietitians and that on board, what kind of nutrition plan did you go from and go to in terms of transitioning from, you know, what you were doing previously to what you were doing now?
A big difference from before I started with a dietitian to start into what my eating looked like afterwards. I've always been a fairly healthy eater, loved salads and fruits and vegetables, but never really was a big protein eater. Like I don't really eat a lot of meat or anything. And so I found like I was just doing what I found was healthy. There was no science, there was no plan. I was just doing what I always did, kind of a thing. Before I started working with a dietitian, and then when you work with one, they sit down and they add up all your food, and they're like, so you're getting like no protein every day, and you're like, oh, and they're like, well, that's fine, you know, one day, but when you're doing sport and you do that for months and months and months, we really need to fix that. So we started putting eggs and different protein sources in through the day, and it made a massive difference to my energy level, and just to things like my hair and my skin and my nails were all so much better from having someone who's qualified look at it and be like, well, you need a bit of this here and you're not quite doing that there. So we got all the basics underway first, and then over the years I've just been fine tweaking to really just get into the nitty gritty. So, you know, on a big intervals day, it's making sure that I have carbohydrates, you know, the night before or the morning of, because they're my primary fuel I'll be burning, whereas a slow, steady state day, they're my fats, so I don't need any extra carbs those days. And looking at like race day nutrition and what works best for my body. Is it having 2 bowls of pasta the night before, you know, a really big 2-hour race, or is it, you know, a jam sandwich the morning of the race, or what works best for my body? So, yeah.
What blood type are you?
Great learning experience. No idea. No idea. I once went to give blood when I was 16, and I passed out and then vomited everywhere. And then they sent me home, and I was sick for 2 days. I was so ill, and I got a letter from them saying, "Thank you very much for trying to give blood, but please never try again." So I was like, okay, well, I'm off the hook now. I've tried to do my good thing, but...
So based on that, you've never done a blood type nutrition plan then?
No.
Okay. So I did one a long time ago when I was competing, and it was really interesting because the science behind it is that there are a lot of different foods that we eat that actually react negatively with our blood types. And they cause all sorts of reactions and toxins to our blood. So depending on, I'm a B negative blood type, so it's quite a rare blood type. And as a result of that, I've got a number of food groups that really upset me and drain and sap my energy if I eat certain foods. And even though they can be super healthy foods, it doesn't matter. It's a toxic reaction that happens with your blood. And I met a South African lady once who put me right onto this, and she actually created a nutrition plan around my blood type, and I had amazing overnight success with that in terms of just how it changed my whole physiological abilities, strength, endurance, everything came to light during that process. So I was just interested to know if you'd ever come across
I have heard of it. I've not done it myself, but that's good to know that you had a really positive effect on you.
Yeah.
It's always good to be aware of these things.
Yeah, I can testify to that myself. I did it for about 13, 14 years, based on the Dr. Diadamo books. And I'm blood type O, so I'm more of a, the older blood type. So hunter-gatherer, game and so forth. But yeah, the lectins, I think, Mark, you're alluding to the lectins.
Yeah.
And I think for any athlete to look into the blood type is very beneficial.
Yeah. All right.
Alicia, Louisa, any other questions for Kate?
Yes, I
sorry.
have one.
We'll shut up. Come on, go for it.
It's okay. I have one, Kate. I was searching more when I saw your episode. I was searching more about paddling, and suddenly I see everywhere SUP, like everywhere, like
Yes.
what is really like it's so big, and I never realized, right?
Yeah.
And I saw in different places, but like in hotels, like you can do it for a few hours or something, like just something, to do in a hotel, right? But not like a sport. I never see it like a sport, like a real races and things like that. So I was looking for that, and I saw that it was everywhere, and it's growing. As you said, it's growing. It's growing really fast, and that is fantastic because I know there are many things to improve in that sport and to make it better, not just for women, right, but for everyone. But you see that too, that it's growing so fast, right? But what do you think is necessary to make it grow even better or faster, not only in Australia, of course, but around the world?
Around the world. Very good question. I think some kind of global governing body, something to organize it and put some, I want to say standardize it, but half of the kind of quirk of paddling is that everything is a bit different, and everything has a different appeal, and it's not kind of one size fits all for everybody. So I guess standardizing in a way that gives greater access but doesn't remove that still kind of individuality feel about each of the races, that they can all have their own kind of unique character in a way. But definitely something that says there's a fixed calendar and this is what you can go to, and these are the standard lengths roughly, and there's a category for, youth, and there's a category for women, and there's a category for men, and there's a category for seniors, and making sure that everybody is included, because it's a bit hard. Like, you go to these races and you get 200 amateurs, show up that aren't elite racers, and they get one race, and then you get like 20 professionals, and you think to really grow the sport you've got to have a lot more fun and engagement with all those grassroots levels, so they want to join and it makes it fun. And so just looking at the whole picture rather than just the elite races, and a lot of focus on juniors as well, because that's where we're going to grow the sport, and I don't think there's been a lot of focus at that level in the sport historically.
Yeah, I understand that, because what I saw, it was many people interested in that, not in a race, not to make a race, right? Just to have the board and go and paddle and have fun. And it's nothing wrong with that. It's the same with soccer or tennis. Yeah, you don't have to compete to be valid. You can do it, of course, yes. Yeah. But for you, the ones that are doing really good and you have opportunity, you're fantastic, you can win. There are so many people that is not, it's in the middle of you, right? Just in the race. Yeah. I understand that. And I was really interested to know how can it be better, because for you it should be a race with people that are your level.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good question. And I think what we're going to see is, you look across other sports at the moment, especially in COVID-19 times, we've got those sports that don't have a strong grassroots base are really struggling at the moment. And it's because they're really reliant on that elite professional visibility that they have to the public. And with a lot of community sports being closed down because of COVID across the world, it's really having a massive impact, because a lot of the revenue streams come from that grassroots, where, you know, memberships and club memberships and all that stuff, and sponsors even of the smaller community stuff, that all filters into the sport to make it what it is. So I think whoever comes along to structure up stand-up paddleboarding really needs to be smart around the way that it's structured across all levels, because often that, you know, you look at cycling today, it's a mess because you've got these breakaway fractions that, you know, control some of the biggest events in the world, and it's just a nightmare. They hold the world of cycling to ransom on certain things, right? So if stand-up paddleboarding goes that way, you'll have this elite separatism that happens almost by country, because they'll go off and they think they own the rights to these particular races and that. Anyway, Alicia, I know you have another question, right?
Just one more.
Okay.
Kate, what is the further that you have done paddling in terms of distance and endurance, like time?
What's the longest that I've paddled?
Yes. Uh-huh.
In a race, probably about 18 Oh no, some of the downwinders are more like 20 kilometers, so maybe like 2.5 hours is probably the longest for a race. But
Wow.
in terms of recreational, I've definitely paddled longer. I went over to Western Australia a couple of years ago to do a race, and we were doing a practice run one day, and we weren't quite sure where the end was, because it's a bit like, it wasn't a clear point, and it was like, well, you line up, you see these trees, and then there's a grey roof, and it's kind of in there. Well, anyway, I completely overshot and went a whole next bay round, and I think I ended up doing 35 kilometers instead of 20. So
Wow.
that was quite a long overshoot.
I don't think that I can do it for
Oh.
more than half an hour.
Yeah, well, you got to start at like, your half an hour and do it for fun and recreation, and then you never know, in 2 years' time you could be doing it for 2 hours, 3 hours.
Thank you.
Yes.
I had a question regarding analogy to running again, where in running you've got new technology that, I'm not saying it's ruining the sport, but all these world records are being broken with a technology that people are questioning whether or not it is technically legal, but it almost borders on cheating. Do you see that in paddle boards, where new technology comes out and gives somebody an unfair advantage, or it hasn't got to that stage yet with materials or design, or are there regulations of what you can do, what you can't do?
There's definitely regulations about your board size, so you have to have a 14-foot length board unless you need a 12.6, but generally a 14-foot length board. But it is definitely like, the more money you have as an individual that you can throw at what board you want, that makes a massive difference. So some boards are so much lighter, like completely carbon fiber. You're even getting ones that are hollow in the middle now, and they're just so much lighter, so you can paddle them around a lot faster. Or, you've got the money to be able to afford 4 different boards, so whichever kind of a race you're doing, you've always got the best board for the race. There's definitely, I'm not going to say it's cheating, because it's pushing the sport to evolve and develop, but it's, if you've got the money to buy the newest boards all the time, then that's great, and if you don't, then you're at a slight disadvantage, and depending on how old and slow your board is, it could be a very large disadvantage.
What's the average cost for a board like that?
If you want a race board, if you want a fast race board, in Aussie dollars, you're looking probably around about 4,000. So I'm not sure what the exchange rate is right now, but it's a fair amount of money. Yeah. But
Wow.
luckily for an introductory board, you just want to paddle around and enjoy, you can get a lot cheaper. Definitely. You don't need a carbon fiber. You don't need it 14 feet long. You don't need an expensive paddle. You just need something that floats and is going to be able to float you comfortably.
But for races, it is important. If you can afford it, you said it's better to have the best for that race.
Definitely, yes.
Okay.
And that's where you know, if you're lucky enough to work with sponsors, I work with the brand One, and they, so I'm a team rider for them, so they help me out. I don't get free boards, but they help me out with my boards so that I always have a very good board, and that makes a massive difference.
And you think your technology on the board or weights or material that they use is competitive with the other people that you compete against?
Definitely. Yeah. I'd say some of the One boards are leading the way. They're one of the first brands to make hollow boards, which are significantly lighter. So I'm very lucky to be able to work with Benny, who's the designer, and Ange and Jacko and Stevo, who own the brand. They live on Currumbin Creek. They live right there. I've trained with them and have known them for many years, so I'm incredibly lucky to be able to work with them. And I guess the reason they're leading the way is that because they are racers themselves, so they know what the board needs. They make their prototypes, they test it, and then they're like, nope, that isn't what I was looking for. We're going to change that tail shape. We're going to change this. We're going to change the underside. We're going to do this. And they're just always playing until they make what they see as the perfect board, and then they put it into production. So
awesome.
Yeah, a little different.
Sorry.
No,
Sorry.
go, Louisa.
Do you feel that you have a voice? Now you're living in Australia, in Brisbane, but do you feel that you have a voice there? If you say, we need to improve this or that, do you feel that people listen?
The sport as a whole, no. If I went to Ange and Jacko about a particular board, that definitely, and they would sit down and work with me and probably tell me how they'd already thought about that and like they'd done this and done that because they're already all over. They're always like 1,000 steps ahead. The sport in general, no, definitely not. And you know, even if you got the top male racer in the world to go to an organizer and say, I want this, I want that, definitely they would consider it. But I think unless you've got the collective of the majority of athletes, it's hard to change the status quo. People are more comfortable, like everything in life, they're more comfortable sticking with what they know and what's their idea. Yeah.
Well, to paddleboard unions or some movement, you know, maybe.
Yeah, and I think they did try and set up something called the Paddlers Collective, actually. But it's very difficult because, again, there's a lot more male paddleboarders, so they seem to have more of a voice on the overall. Obviously, the women get the voice on the women's side of the sport. But in the men's side of the sport, there's, you know, the late 30-year-olds who have been racing for 10, 15 plus years and who have a different perspective on life versus the 17, 18-year-olds who are new, really fast, but want something very different. You tend to find they're the ones that want the biggest prize money and aren't too worried about your grassroots level and investing back in the sport versus the more mature paddlers who have a very different outlook on life, who are all about, we need to do what's best for the sport. Yes, I want a wage, but most of us have worked full time, you know, the whole time we've done our paddling. So we just keep doing that, and it's about how we grow the sport as a whole and what's best for the sport versus what's best for myself as an individual right now is the difference. Yeah.
What about collaboration? Is there much, you know, I see across the global business world as well as in sport, there's probably not as much collaboration going on as there could be and should be with a sport that's starting off like this. There's nothing wrong with, you know, organizers and that going across to other sports and seeing how they did it and how they evolved to learn from their journey. Do you see any evidence of that happening in the stand-up paddleboarding?
I don't know, but then, like I say, it's down to individual organisers, and I I don't know the history of those individual organisers and what they've done. So they might have a background in surfing or different sports, and I'm just not aware of that. But on a surface level, no, I don't see that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, folks, we're coming close to the end. So before we wrap up, does anybody have a last question, thought,
Yes.
idea? Yes, Louisa, go for it.
Yes.
You're going to invite Kate to Cancun to come paddleboarding, are you?
Yeah, but not in the lagoon because there are a lot of crocodiles. So no.
Oh, no, no thanks.
The ocean.
No.
Yeah. Oh, okay. The last question is: do you have a race in mind? Not thinking about COVID, of course, but do you have a race in mind that you're really interested in the future?
There's lots of them. Because every race is different, they all hold a different appeal. So it's tricky to choose one. I guess one that I do really love is Hood River in Oregon in the US. Oh, yeah. It's an incredible race. It's down a river, but you get the tide running out and the wind blowing the opposite way, and all these bumps stand up in the river, and you just connect all the bumps and surf down. And it's a bit like a 2-week holiday. You go 2 weeks before the race and you just downwind 3-4 times a day this route, and then you race at the end of it. And that's probably one of my favorite ones, generally because it has such a great vibe. Everybody's so friendly. Everybody is just loving paddling and what they're doing and so happy to be there. So it's a great vibe, and I think that's what really helps make it.
Brilliant. Anybody else got a last question for Kate? No? Yeah. David,
I had one.
Yep.
Sorry, I'm speaking so much here. When you had the broken hand, I'm just curious, 6 months out, what was the biggest takeaway from that whole experience? Did you take away like a spiritual lesson from that? I'm just curious.
I think the only thing that I took away was it reminded me how much I love paddling and how much I love being on the water, because I could still run and bike and do other things, but just kind of like a fresh reminder that I'm so lucky to be able to do what I do and to have a healthy, fit, able body. It's easy to lose that appreciation and lose that perspective. So it kind of really gave me that back again of I'm so lucky to be who I am and where I am and to have the abilities and opportunities that I do.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Always nice to end with a bit of gratitude, isn't it, folks?
And definitely.
There we go.
Yes.
Well, listen, Kate, it's been fantastic. And yeah, thank you, everybody, for asking really, really good questions there. And I'm sure Kate appreciated that like I did. It was great to hear all the different varieties of questions that people have got about stand-up paddleboarding. And Kate, but before we all get together again, we're all going to get out there and give it a go and report back to you on how our first experiences were on stand-up paddleboarding, because I feel embarrassed that none of us have done it yet.
We should reconvene in a month, and then you can tell me how it went, and I'll give you some more tips. But you might all be pros by then.
There we go. We've got pressure, folks. We've got to do it within a month, okay?
Okay. I was thinking
next weekend.
No, if you leave it till next year, Louisa, it'll never happen. You gotta, strike while the iron's hot.
But I'm really scared about the sharks, so yeah, that's the problem.
Yeah, well, find somewhere where lots of other people go, and then it's a little safer.
Yeah, reduces your number of being eaten, Louisa.
Yeah, and just make sure if you can't swim, wear a life jacket and you take all the necessary safety precautions.
That's good, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, listen, Kate, on behalf of everybody, I'd like to thank you very much today for taking your time out to being our first ever virtual guest on the Global Sports Channel. It's been really brilliant, and you've proven the concept of our show that it's a really good session to do. So I'm looking forward to doing lots more of these with other guests. So thanks very much for being our pioneer today, Kate.
Oh, thank you. And thank you, Louisa, David, Alicia, for your time and your questions. I really appreciated it. And your energy.
Thank you.
You're all smiley and happy. I feel set up for the day now.
Thank you so much, Kate.
Brilliant. Well, I wish everyone a great day, and thank you all very much for joining today. And we'll put out a recording of this as well, because I've recorded the whole show. So we'll put out a episode of this for everybody to look back on. And Kate, you can share it with your family back in the UK.
Excellent.
Where are the UK, Kate? Where are they?
They're all around. I've got some in Milton Keynes, some on the south coast, near Bournemouth, Norwich, Sheffield.
Sheffield, yeah. I'm from Leeds. I grew up in Leeds. So,
Yes. Yeah.
We were in Norfolk last summer. Yeah.
Oh, really? That's where I went to uni, in Norfolk.
No kidding. Yeah, I've got cousins in Norfolk, yeah.
Me too. There you go.